What did you think was going to happen? She didn't know. But one newborn almost paid with his life. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. It was a cold January day in 2022 when few could imagine the horror waiting behind a shopping mall dumpster in a small New Mexico town. On January 7th, in Hobbs, a quiet city near the Texas border, a newborn baby would find himself discarded like garbage, only to be pulled from the trash against all odds. This is where our story begins. 3 people, rummaging through dumpsters behind a local mall, were searching for anything of value. What they found instead almost defied belief. Around 7:45 p.m., they moved a black trash bag that looked like any other. But inside, wrapped in a dirty bath towel, lay a newborn baby. His umbilical cord was still attached. The finders called for help and tried to keep him warm inside a truck. When authorities arrived, the baby was described as cold, wet, and weak. The towel was soaked, blood-stained, and he had visible head bruising and dried blood on parts of his body. Emergency crews rushed him to a local hospital and then airlifted him to a bigger facility for treatment. By any reasonable expectation, that baby, abandoned in freezing cold, with no clothes, no warmth, and no care, should not have survived. But he did. What should have been a tragedy became a near miracle. Prosecutors and a later sentencing judge would call his survival nothing short of luck and the grace of God. Not long after the baby was found, investigators began scrutinizing surveillance footage from the mall's parking lot. The video captured a white car pulling up beside the dumpsters at around 2 p.m. on that Friday afternoon. A woman later identified as an 18-year-old local, Alexis Avila, exited the driver's seat, opened the back door, removed a black trash bag, threw it into the dumpster, and drove off. Armed with that footage, police executed a search warrant on her home and vehicle. Inside, they found evidence consistent with a birth, including blood, clothing, and a towel matching what was used. When confronted, Avila confessed she had given birth that day at home and dumped the newborn. She admitted she had not realized she was pregnant until the day before. According to her, she had sought medical attention for back pain and abdominal discomfort on January 6th, when she said a urine test revealed pregnancy. At her arraignment shortly after arrest, she pleaded not guilty to 2 charges: attempted first-degree murder and child abuse resulting in great bodily harm. A judge placed her under strict house arrest until trial, no access to social media, no contact with minors, compulsory ankle monitoring, and no leaving the town/state. According to Avila, she panicked. She claimed the birth happened unexpectedly in her bathroom. In shock and alone, feeling overwhelmed and not sure whom to call, she said she wrapped the baby in a towel, placed him in a trash bag, then drove around, confused, before dumping the child in the mall dumpster. But prosecutors painted a different picture. The surveillance footage showed a deliberate act: bag retrieved, child discarded, quick departure. Nearby searchers found the baby hours later, and forensics tied the evidence back to Avila's home and car. To prosecutors, that was not an accident. It was a chilling choice. As the community reeled from the horror, many began asking, how could someone do this? And if not premeditated, what kind of state of mind leads to discarding a newborn like trash? At this point, a baby discarded, found alive, a mother arrested. People breathed a collective sigh of relief at the baby's survival, but were haunted by the unanswered question: what would justice look like? For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. The day Alexis Avila's trial began in Hobbs, New Mexico, the courtroom was packed with locals, reporters, and legal observers. The small city, still shaken by the dumpster incident, seemed to hold its breath. Everyone wanted to know, how could an 18-year-old end up in court for nearly killing her own newborn? The prosecution opened with a clear narrative: that January afternoon was not a moment of confusion. It was an act that endangered a life. Prosecutor Lauren Hernandez described the sequence of events, emphasizing the surveillance footage and forensic findings. The baby was left in conditions that could easily have resulted in death, Hernandez told the jury. The accused had a choice. She chose to discard him. The defense, led by attorney Miguel Ortiz, focused on Alexis' age, her shock at discovering the pregnancy, and her mental state during the delivery. He argued that panic, not malice, drove her actions. This was a young woman facing a terrifying situation alone, Ortiz said. She made a mistake in judgment, not a premeditated attempt to harm her child. The prosecution presented a combination of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence that created a compelling timeline. The mall cameras showed Alexis parking, retrieving the black trash bag, and discarding it in the dumpster. Prosecutors highlighted her calm, deliberate movements, contrary to the notion of panic. The blood and birth materials found in her home matched the newborn. DNA testing confirmed her maternity. The towel inside the trash bag matched fabric from her apartment, and fibers confirmed handling consistent with newborn care, suggesting she wrapped him immediately after birth. The neonatologist Dr. Karen Patel testified about the baby's injuries and condition when rescued. She described hypothermia, mild head trauma, and other stress indicators, noting that survival was not guaranteed. If the baby had remained in that environment for even an hour longer, the outcome could have been fatal, Dr. Patel told the court. The men who discovered the baby testified, describing the infant's fragile state. Their accounts painted a vivid picture of the immediate danger he faced, cold, bruised, and wrapped only in a soiled towel. Alexis' phone records showed searches related to pregnancy and emergency births the day prior, supporting the defense's claim that she only learned of the pregnancy shortly before giving birth. The jury had to weigh these conflicting realities. Deliberate actions shown on video versus the sudden shock and isolation argued by the defense. Throughout the trial, Alexis appeared tense but composed. She testified in her own defense, describing her shock at discovering she was pregnant and the fear she felt during the unexpected home birth. "I didn't know what to do. Panicked. I wanted him to survive, but I didn't know how to help him," she explained. Prosecutors cross-examined her, emphasizing that taking the baby to a hospital or calling emergency services could have saved him without risk. "You had options," Hernandez said. "Instead, you put him in a bag and tossed him away." Alexis' responses were brief, often tearful, highlighting her regret but not negating the fact that her choice had placed a life in jeopardy. The trial became a battle over intent. Prosecutors charged her with attempted first-degree murder and child abuse resulting in great bodily harm, arguing that the deliberate act of discarding a newborn in freezing conditions satisfied both criteria. The defense countered that intent to kill could not be proven. They suggested that Alexis' panic, youth, and lack of guidance meant she did not consciously aim to harm her baby. Instead, they sought mitigation, a lesser charge that acknowledged recklessness rather than malice. To strengthen the case, the prosecution also referenced safe haven laws, statutes allowing parents to legally surrender newborns to designated locations without facing criminal charges. New Mexico's law permitted surrender at hospitals or fire stations. The prosecution argued that Alexis knew, or should have known, that help was available, reinforcing their position that she made a conscious choice to endanger the infant. The case drew intense media coverage. Headlines described the dumpster baby miracle and the teen mother who panicked. Local residents expressed outrage, some urging for the maximum penalty, while others advocated for leniency, citing her age and circumstances. The case also sparked discussions nationwide about safe haven laws, mental health support for pregnant teens, and newborn abandonment statistics. According to the National Safe Haven Alliance, thousands of newborns are abandoned annually in the U.S., and survival rates vary drastically depending on timing, environment, and response. This case became a textbook example of both danger and survival against the odds. On the final day of the trial, both sides made impassioned pleas. Prosecutors reminded the jury that a baby's life hung in the balance and that actions, not intentions, dictated criminal responsibility. "The law doesn't forgive leaving a newborn in a dumpster," Hernandez said. "The baby survived by chance, not because the accused did the right thing." The defense concluded with a plea for understanding. Ortiz reminded the jury that Alexis was only 18, frightened, and alone. Her fear should not be turned into a lifelong sentence for a single, albeit serious, mistake, he said. After hours of deliberation, the jury was tasked with answering the question at the core of the case. Did Alexis Avila intend to kill her child? Or was this a panic decision that endangered him but fell short of premeditation? The courtroom drama, the testimony, and the evidence left the city on edge. Everyone knew the baby's survival was miraculous, but now the focus shifted to the mother's fate. Would the jury side with the prosecution, or would they accept the defense's narrative of fear and confusion? For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. After weeks of testimony, the city of Hobbs awaited the jury's decision in the Alexis Avila case. Courtroom seats were filled with anxious family members, journalists, and curious locals, all eager to hear whether the teen mother would be convicted of the severe charges she faced. The jury's deliberation. The jury retired after the closing arguments. Hours turned into a day, then a second day, as 12 individuals reviewed evidence, deliberated over intent, and debated the fine line between panic and premeditation. Each piece of evidence, from the surveillance footage to the forensic tests, was scrutinized. The prosecution's narrative that Alexis deliberately endangered her newborn clashed with the defense's portrayal of a frightened, isolated teenager making a panicked decision. The jury had to weigh every nuance. The wrapping of the baby in a towel, the choice of location for disposal, her prior searches on her phone, and her testimony describing fear and confusion. Legal experts noted that cases like this often hinge on the definition of intent to kill versus reckless endangerment. In New Mexico, establishing intent requires proving beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant consciously aimed to harm or kill, a high bar when panic and youth are factors. On a crisp morning in February, the courtroom reconvened. The judge asked the jury foreperson to read the decision aloud. The air was tense. The baby, now safely with his adoptive family, had already begun a new life outside the courtroom walls. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of child abuse resulting in great bodily harm and guilty of attempted first-degree murder as charged, the foreperson declared. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Families of the victim, the public, and even some jurors showed visible emotion. The decision reflected the jury's acknowledgement that Alexis' actions were deliberate enough to warrant the serious attempted murder charge. Judge William G.W. Shoebridge presided over the sentencing hearing. Known for his fair but firm approach, he listened to statements from both the prosecution and defense before delivering his ruling. The prosecution urged the maximum sentence, highlighting the deliberate nature of placing a newborn in a dumpster and the potential fatal consequences. They argued that the law must reflect the seriousness of leaving a helpless infant in life-threatening conditions. The defense implored leniency, citing Alexis' age, lack of prior criminal history, remorse, and the unusual circumstances of a sudden, unassisted birth. They requested a sentence that included rehabilitation and mental health support rather than solely punitive measures. Judge Shoebridge ultimately balanced these arguments. He noted the gravity of the crime, emphasizing that the survival of the baby was due to chance and the quick actions of passers-by, not the defendant's judgment. At the same time, he acknowledged Alexis' youth and lack of prior offenses. The actions of the defendant placed a defenseless child in mortal danger. The law must address such recklessness, the judge said. Yet we must also consider the circumstances. Age, mental state, and remorse cannot be ignored. Alexis Avila was sentenced to 16 years in state prison, followed by 2 years of probation. She was ordered to complete mandatory counseling and parenting education prior to release. The defense immediately signaled plans to appeal, citing misinterpretation of intent and procedural errors during jury instructions. Appeals in cases involving intent versus recklessness often hinge on whether the jury was properly guided on legal definitions. Alexis' attorney argued that the jury should have been allowed to consider lesser-included offenses more thoroughly, and that the panic-driven context of the birth was not adequately weighted. The appeal process opened the door to prolonged legal debate, keeping the community's attention fixed on the case. Public reactions were mixed. Some applauded the sentence, arguing that it upheld justice for the newborn while still acknowledging the teen's youth. Others felt it was too harsh, citing the extraordinary circumstances and Alexis' apparent remorse. Media coverage focused on the baby's survival story, often calling it a miracle and highlighting the role of ordinary citizens in saving a life. Headlines underscored the contrast between near tragedy and the infant's rescue, emphasizing both the dangers of abandonment and the potential for recovery. Local lawmakers referenced the case in discussions about expanding safe haven laws and increasing public awareness. Crisis counselors and advocacy groups used the story to underscore the importance of accessible support for pregnant teens, pointing to gaps in education and resources that can leave young mothers feeling trapped and desperate. For Alexis, prison was not only a punishment but also a period of reflection. Mental health experts testified during sentencing about the potential trauma of an unexpected birth and subsequent criminal prosecution, especially for someone so young. These assessments, while not reducing her legal responsibility, influenced sentencing and parole considerations. The baby, meanwhile, thrived in foster care and was later adopted. Social workers emphasized that early intervention and rapid medical attention were crucial in ensuring his survival, showing the profound impact of timely action even in the face of reckless endangerment. Even with the verdict delivered and a sentence handed down, several questions lingered. Would the appeal succeed in reducing Alexis' charges or sentence? How would this case influence local policy on newborn abandonment and safe haven awareness? Could the defense successfully argue for leniency based on panic and mental state in future legal proceedings? These questions ensured that while one chapter of the story concluded in the courtroom, the broader narrative of law, justice, and societal responsibility was far from over. For more true crime stories like this, hit the subscribe button. Shortly after sentencing in May 2023, Alexis Avila's defense team filed a formal appeal, challenging the court's interpretation of intent and jury instructions. In October 2023, a judge granted her release from custody pending the outcome of this appeal. She was placed under conditions similar to house arrest during this period. The motion claimed that the jury was not properly guided on the distinction between reckless endangerment and attempted first-degree murder, a legal nuance that could significantly alter the outcome. Appeals of this nature are complex. Unlike a trial, appeals do not re-examine witness testimony or evidence in the same way. Instead, appellate courts focus on whether legal errors occurred that may have affected the verdict or sentence. The defense argued that the court failed to sufficiently instruct the jury on how Alexis' panic, age, and lack of prior criminal history could mitigate culpability. Prosecutors countered that the jury's verdict was consistent with the evidence. They emphasized the deliberate act of abandoning a newborn in a dumpster and highlighted Alexis' phone searches and planning as proof of awareness and recklessness. They warned that reducing the charges would send a dangerous message about accountability in cases of infant endangerment. After over a year of review, the New Mexico Court of Appeals issued its ruling in November 2025. The court upheld all original convictions and the 16-year sentence, stating that the jury instructions, trial procedures, and evidence presented were legally sound. The appellate judges acknowledged the defense's argument regarding panic, but noted that intent does not require premeditation over weeks or months. A moment of deliberate action that puts a child in mortal danger is sufficient for the charges Alexis faced. With the appeal denied, the Attorney General's office indicated they would work to have Alexis remanded back into custody to begin her prison sentence. The decision reaffirmed that while youth and fear are mitigating factors in sentencing, they do not erase criminal responsibility when a life is placed in immediate danger. For legal scholars and local communities, the ruling underscored the judiciary's careful balance between empathy for adolescent defendants and protection of vulnerable victims. Following the appeal, public interest shifted from courtroom drama to broader social questions. Local news outlets, social media commentators, and advocacy groups discussed the implications of the case in depth. Safe haven laws. Many highlighted the need for greater awareness of laws allowing parents to safely surrender infants at hospitals or fire stations without fear of prosecution. Teen pregnancy resources. Social workers and nonprofits emphasized the role of education, access to counseling, and community support to prevent crisis-driven actions like newborn abandonment. Legal precedent. Lawyers noted that the case could serve as a reference point for future incidents involving teen mothers in distress, particularly regarding the distinction between panic-driven decisions and criminal recklessness. Community programs were initiated to educate teenagers about safe haven options, Local clinics offered confidential counseling, and several public awareness campaigns were launched. In this way, the tragedy became a catalyst for preventative measures. During the time she was out of custody awaiting appeal results, Alexis navigated a complex reality. While not in prison, she lived with the uncertainty of her future and the notoriety of her case. The recent ruling meant her life was about to change drastically again as she prepared to begin her 16-year sentence. Inside the correctional system, once remanded, she would focus on mental health counseling, reflecting on the panic, fear, and isolation that contributed to her actions. Reports from prison educators would indicate engagement in parenting courses, anger management, and life skills programs, all designed to help prepare her for eventual reintegration into society. While her teenage years were now spent largely behind bars, these programs aimed to ensure that she would emerge better equipped to prevent similar mistakes in the future. Meanwhile, the infant, whose survival had captured national attention and was named Saul by the paternal family, thrived under the care of his relatives. Social services confirmed that he received immediate medical attention after the rescue, addressing both physical health and emotional well-being. Eventually, he was secured in a stable family environment with his paternal relatives, ensuring he had a safe and nurturing home. While the child would never know his biological mother in early childhood, the combination of community intervention, medical care, and long-term family planning gave him a chance at a normal life. Psychologists involved in the case emphasized that early stability, consistent caregiving, and therapeutic support were crucial in mitigating the long-term effects of early trauma. The child's story became a rare example of survival and resilience amid one of the most dangerous scenarios a newborn can face. The case also sparked policy discussions at the state level. Lawmakers considered measures to increase visibility of safe haven options through school programs, public service announcements, and healthcare providers, improve resources for at-risk pregnant teens, including counseling, financial support, and confidential medical services, examine the legal treatment of panic-driven offenses to ensure consistent sentencing guidelines for adolescent defendants. Legal analysts often reference this case in debates over how the justice system balances accountability and compassion. While some argue that the 16-year sentence was essential to deter similar acts, others highlight the importance of rehabilitation for young offenders who act out of fear rather than malice. Experts emphasize that Alexis Avila's case demonstrates the critical intersection of law, social services, and community awareness. One moment of panic can have life-altering consequences. Immediate intervention by witnesses and medical personnel can save lives. Preventive education and accessible support for teens can reduce the risk of newborn abandonment. The legal system must balance punishment with rehabilitation, particularly for youth in crisis. While the trial, verdict, and appeal addressed the criminal justice aspect, the broader lessons extended far beyond the courtroom. Communities became more informed, teens more aware, and policymakers more attuned to the complexities of adolescent decision-making in high-pressure situations. By the time Alexis prepared to start her sentence after the appeal denial, the narrative had shifted. No longer just a story of crime and courtroom tension, it had become a case study in rescue, survival, and societal responsibility. The baby's survival was credited to quick thinking by civilians and first responders. The judicial system had upheld justice, and legislative conversations began addressing prevention and awareness. Though the family and community endured trauma, the case sparked meaningful change that could save lives in the future. In the end, the true legacy of this case is not just in the gavel's echo, but in the lives it touched, the lessons it taught, and the safety nets it helped to strengthen. The Alexis Avila case serves as a stark reminder that behind every headline lies a complex interplay of human error, legal accountability, and societal responsibility. It is a story of fear, consequence, and ultimately, survival. One that continues to resonate as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of timely intervention. And as always, you've been watching True Crime Story Vault, where every case is examined with facts, clarity, and respect for the people affected. If you want to see more deep-dive true crime investigations like this one, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.